Now it's time to turn to the hurling because the All-Ireland Championship is back this weekend, and Tommy Walsh is with us on the line. Good morning to you, Tommy.
Hey guys, how you on? Hi Kenny.
So Leinster kicks off this weekend, Munster throws in as well this weekend. I presume you're like a kid before Christmas.
That's a great week. Yeah, we've been waiting, I suppose, back to the clubs for the last month on, and it's probably gone out of people's minds really, the inter-county scene, because people have been so involved in their own clubs in their own county. So really, I suppose you're trying to find out teams, what way teams are going to set up, and nobody really knows, because you would imagine most injuries have now cleared up on. The guys have been given time to rest over the month off and really kind of look at peaking for this weekend, and it's kind of really only starting to hit home this week. And looking at the games that are ahead of us, like both Leinster and Munster, like one time really the Munster Championship was what excited most people, but now it's both provinces, so we're looking forward to a great weekend.
Yeah, there's two crackers in Munster, but we're going to start with Leinster and we're going to start with Kilkenny. You say that most injuries have cleared up. I don't think that's the case with Kilkenny at the moment. Huge injury worries, of course. Owen Murphy, one of the big ones. You've got Conor Delaney, Killian Buckley and James Maher also on the injury list. And then Joey Holden as well. It's come out this morning that he's going to be missing this weekend. Richie Hogan as well, a huge doubt. And Jamesy O'Connor last night, taking that into account on off the ball, is leaning towards Dublin for this game on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's definitely, after bringing it back to more, it was always going to be a 50-50 game, because Dublin came to Nolan Park for the league semi-final to play the All-Ireland champions Limerick, and there was only 3 points in it at the very end, and we've seen Limerick steamrolling most teams on. So definitely Dublin have proved it over the league. I think Pat Gilroy put in a massive foundation with Dublin last year. What did Matty Kenny do? He brought kind of the winning mentality. He was there with Coola, won I think 3 Dublin club championships, went on and won 2 club All-Irelands. So they believe in this guy. They believe this guy can get them over the line. He's from Galway, he's steeped in hurling, and I met him on went over to the Chicago 11s a few years ago. Matty Kenny was with us, and just a real hurling man and knows the game inside out. So I'm sure he's after blending all that. Plus he's after bringing back a few of the cooler guys. Darragh O'Connell, the Kerry man, he's back on the team. So yeah, I think even before Kilkenny had injury worries, Kilkenny were, looking at this match with hesitancy. Now you take into the injuries, but if you look past the injury zone, most of them guys, you wouldn't know, bar Owen Murphy, I suppose, who was going to be on the team and who wasn't. Towards coming back into the team, you have TJ Reid, you have Colin Fennelly and you have Adrian Mullen. Now again, I would have added Joey Holden to that, but obviously he's injured now and he's out. But they're three massive players to bring back into the forward line. The worry, I suppose, with Dublin is, we saw in the league semi-final, they condensed the middle on, so our forwards won't get much amount of space. So I'd say it'll be a dog-eat-dog kind of a battle more than a kind of a cork and tip, let the boys out and let them hurl, free-flowing hurling. I'd say it'll be more of a dog-eat-dog battle.
And who will that suit more, Tommy?
I think it'll suit Dublin more, because if you look at that Kilkenny team, if you let them guys out in space and just them versus their own marker, you'd imagine that Kilkenny will come out victorious with all the guys that are back. Whereas I think when they condense it like that in Nolan Park, it's a tight field for inter-county. It's so funny, like when you go out with the club, it's the biggest field that you've ever played on. Go out with the county and it's the smallest field. So yeah, I think it will suit Dublin more, the fact that they're going to condense it around the middle.
In terms of Dublin's graph at the moment, I just got sucked into a bit of a YouTube wormhole yesterday, and I got caught watching you flying it against Dublin in the 2009 Leinster final. I think you went on to be hurler of the year that year. Like, it seems at that point that Dublin were reaching their peak. They essentially did go on to win a Leinster title. Then a few years later, there was a sense that they'd gone off the boil for a couple of years. Do you feel like the 1 year that Pat Gilroy's put into this team and the encouraging signs that we've seen in the league this year, that Dublin are about to reach that peak again and perhaps scale an even higher height?
They are, and you see, what it comes down to on is producing hurlers year in, year out. You can't rely on the same guys all the time. And this all began back when we were in school, in secondary school in St. Kieran's College. We came up against a Dublin Colleges team. And that was the real start of Dublin hurling. That was the time to put in all the money into the coaching, all the money into the schools, the underage setup. And it's now we're seeing it. Like, you go back to 2009, so sometimes teams and counties produce a golden generation, but the teams that last are the guys that keep producing players over and over and over again. So I think that the current team is a testament to the amount of work that began probably in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s, in the underage coaching, in the primary schools, the secondary schools. I was only talking to one of my teammates in Tullaroan last night, Mark Welsh. He's a teacher a primary school teacher up in Dublin. If you get to a primary school's county final, you get to play in Croke Park, like where you play 3 matches side by side and busloads. If you've 400 in the school, they all come in busloads and fill out the bottom tier of Croke Park down near the pitch. Like, that has to be massive for the development of hurling in Dublin. And I think we have to start there. That's why hurling is blossoming up in Dublin. That's why they're producing teams that don't go away. They're coming year after year. And going back to your point about Gilroy, yes, he laid the foundations last year, and now is the time, I suppose, to produce. They have produced, and we must look back, they have produced in the league, because nobody saw them getting to a league semi-final. And they had massive injuries even for that Limerick team, guys pulling out after, I suppose, 5 or 10 minutes with injuries. Keeney was missing before and that. So they have a lovely blend of youth and experience. So I think this year is definitely a year for Dublin to produce it. Now, unlucky enough for them, like last year, they could have pipped Kilkenny, and it was up in Parnell Park. But now they're coming probably with a stronger team. Kilkenny with all their injury worries, but it's down in Nolan Park. So, like we have seen through last year, all the round-robin matches, most times it's the home team is winning if it's a 50-50 game. So, listen, it will take a monumental effort for them to bring home a victory out in Nolan Park. But listen, they're in that win mode, and Matty Kenny is definitely after bringing that to the table.
Just before we get into the Munster games, Tommy, how are you seeing Leinster? Who do you think is going to finish first, second and third in the Leinster Championship?
Yeah, it's like Munster now, Owen. It's like Munster. It's kind of, it's like a lucky dip. But like Galway, you would have definitely, before Joe Canning got injured, you definitely say that they were going to come out. But now they're back amongst the chasing pack. I would go, I suppose, Kilkenny and maybe Kilkenny, Wexford, and either Dublin or Galway then. So I'll say Kilkenny, Wexford, and then pick your Galway or Dublin then out of the rest.
All right, okay. Let's move on to the Munster Championship. We'll get to Cork Tip, probably the game of the weekend, in just a moment. But I do want to start with Waterford against Clare, because this is a huge moment for Waterford hurling fans. It's been years since they've had a championship game of note in Walsh Park, and the advantage, as you mentioned there, when it comes to having your own home ground in this new form of the championship, is vital.
It's vital, and I remember saying it last year. If Walsh Park could only, if they could only hold 3,000 people, they should be having their home games down in Walsh Park. They've been talking about this game for the last number of weeks. I think it's sold out since 2 weeks ago. It's absolutely massive. It's going to be like a coliseum down there. I think I'm down there myself with yourselves covering the game, and I can't wait for it. I'm actually waiting to get off this call because I'm going to leave just so that I arrive on time, because the traffic is going to be massive going over the bridge below Watford. Yeah, listen, and I was going through the Watford players, like, it's everything. Ballygunner, go back to the club scene. Ballygunner are Munster champions. After such a long wait, after so much heartbreak in Munster, finally they got over the Munster final hurdle. Now you have all these guys with Munster say minor medals, under 21 medals, All Ireland minor, All Ireland under 21 medals in their back pockets. This team excites Watford. They're putting up huge scores in the league. So they're really behind them. Derek McGrath has put in, like Pat Gilroy with Dublin, he has put in huge foundations in this team. The culture in Watford is massive at the moment. They're all living, breathing hurling at the moment. And then just go through their individual players. Do they have the X-Factor players? They do. They have the Tighes. They have the Ozzie Gleesons. They have the Jamie Barnes, the 2 Bennett brothers up front, Paddy O'Matney. Like, the names just roll off the tongue on. So it's such an exciting time for Watford. And to get them, like last year, we all know they had no home game. They were playing their home games up in Thurles. I think they played a home game in Limerick. So to have it down in Watford, and the fact that it's going to be such a small crowd, I think it holds about 11,000. It'll be close to the pitch, so the noise levels will be deafening, and that's really one that I can't wait for.
Yeah, you describe it as a coliseum there. Is there any county ground that you hated going to, or that you kind of got intimidated by almost? Not that Kilkenny hurlers got intimidated that often.
Yeah, no, I didn't get intimidated, but I suppose you love nearly going to them grounds as a player because, you know, I suppose the packed grounds, it's not too often you come across them. But definitely Wexford Park was the place to be. When you went down there and Wexford are at their peak, and both the crowd, they just love it. They will follow their team to the end of the earth. Like the Liverpool supporters, I suppose, last night. You hear the chanting and you'd love to be part of it. Well, we were often part of games down in Wexford Park where it was just magical, and it's even after improving now with this round robin series. So I think Wexford supporters down in Wexford Park, I don't think you could meet any better than that.
No, I've definitely heard that as well from people in your position. Just before we wrap up on this game, Tommy, like you mentioned the league there, it's kind of hard to read into a lot of what happened in the league because of the new format, and there wasn't a huge incentive, particularly with no relegation at stake essentially. But when it comes to Waterford, in terms of what you've seen in terms of the Pádraig Fanning style, how big a departure is it from the Derek McGrath style, and is it a style that can take them back to the All-Ireland final?
Yeah, it's hard to really figure it out in the league. It seemed to be a mix and match, that sometimes they went all defensive, sometimes they left the guys up front. Like, the important thing here is it doesn't matter whether they bring back their guys. So if their half Hurling comes back and helps out the defence, that's okay. As long as when the ball goes up, it's going up into a 1v1 situation or a 2v2 or a 3v3. The problem that I see is when the ball goes up, we'll say to Stephen Bennett or Shane Bennett or even Maurice Shanahan, and it's a 1v2 or a 2v3 or a 2v4. That's where the problems start, because the defenders are so good now. They're all watching the videos of the opposition teams. All they'll do is break down the ball. They won't even go for the ball. They play the man, let the ball break for the sweeper. So you can imagine if there's two guys up there versus, we'll say, Stephen Bennett. Stephen Bennett is probably one of the top forwards in the country at the moment. Ball comes up, all the man marking him has to do is say David McInerney, play the man, ball goes to the sweeper, Colin Galvin, and out they go. Now, flick it around. Imagine the ball comes down and it's Stephen Bennett and Maurice Shanahan, or Stephen Bennett and Paddy O'Mahony versus two clear defenders. Suddenly you're asking questions of that clear backline. It would be different if Waterford didn't have the forwards. They have the forwards. So we've seen any time in the league that it's a 1v1, they are deadly dangerous. The Bennett brothers are brilliant at getting goals, they're brilliant at taking on their men. So for me, if Pádraig Fanning goes with, and as I said, and I stress this, they can bring back their players, no problem. It's just when they go up the field, like Limerick will hit the ball up the field long if it's a 1v1 or if it's in the favour of their forward. But if it's a 2v1 or a 3v1, they won't strike it up, they will go short. So I think Waterford are the same. Come back if they want, but when they're going forward, make sure and hit the ball up when it's 1v1 or 2v2, and I think they'll get great success. So I'm very excited to see how Waterford turn up on Sunday.
Let's talk Cork Tip also on Sunday, Tommy. And it's interesting listening to Daithí Regan on the radio last night talking about the return of Liam Sheedy, saying that Tip have fallen behind a little bit and hurling has even changed since they last won the All-Ireland only a few years ago. Never mind the last time Liam Sheedy was an inter-county manager. How big an issue do you see that being for him in terms of the game progressing since he's been out of the game?
I think the league was a learning curve for Liam Sheedy. I think the trainings that they have, I suppose, taken on since last November have been a learning curve for him. He has said it himself, the game has moved on, but there's no better man. I know Liam Sheedy, I'm a big believer in Liam Sheedy, because anything he turns his hands at, he seems to be successful. So I think the thing with Liam Sheedy is he brought back everyone. He trained them like demons for the first 3 or 4 months. Their off season was supposed to be unbelievable with what they done. They looked like a tired team in the league. In last year's championship, they looked like a tired team, a team that was just relying on their skill, their ability to win their own ball, their ability to just basically hurl. They didn't look fresh, they didn't look hungry. I think if Liam Sheedy has used it, you can look at the Tipperary team on. These aren't 19, 20-year-olds. There's most of their main players are in their late 20s, early 30s. The main thing I would see with older players is freshness. They have the fitness built up from the years of training. They have the skill. They have everything. You just need them hungry and savage for that ball. And I think freshness is the key. And I think they only played possibly one club championship game. I'm open to correction on that. I think Liam Sheedy has made sure this season that they're going to be fresh come the first round, which is next weekend against Cork. So if he has done that, I think that will definitely play in their favour, and there will be more than a match for Cork.
Do you buy that notion that hurling has changed an awful lot in the last decade?
Yeah, it has changed massively, because when I got the ball as a half-back 5 or 10 years ago, you drove it as far as you could down the field, and you knew that was going to be someone down there that had to win it. Let the forwards win their own ball. That's the way we played the game. Go back to Jack Charlton, like, put him under pressure. Like, that was the main thing. That's the way we played hurling back in the day. Nowadays, it's all about using the ball. So now if you get the ball, you have to look around. You could be playing the ball backwards, forwards. So it's more definitely a heads-up hurling nowadays. And much, like, if you get the ball now on, there could be 4 or 5 lads on you. So it's much tougher, I'd say, for a small player, maybe a player that isn't terribly fast, that when you get the ball, there's 3 or 4 lads around you. They're, after spending 5, 6, 7 years in the weight room, they're massive, they're physical. How do you get past them? So I think hurling has definitely changed. And, and I think if you go look at the All-Ireland champions, though, for the last number of years, it's still the teams that are winning their own ball. It's still the teams that are attacking, that are pushing their players up. They're still the teams that are winning come the end of the year. So while it has changed, it's still all about putting the ball over the bar at the other end of the field. Like, you go to Kenny in the soccer, like, you can park the bus. You look at Jose Mourinho and Inter Milan versus Barcelona a number of years ago. I think they won maybe 3-1 or that over in Inter, over in Italy. That to go to, I think, the new camp, and they just parked the bus and got through to a Champions League final. I don't think you can do that in hurling on, because you're inviting. At this time of the year, when you're playing maybe against lesser teams, it's possible. But when you get to the latter stages, when you're playing against the best players and the best teams, you can score from 60, 70 yards. Not only that, if you're given the ball, if you're parking the bus and you're giving the ball to the opposition, you're inviting them on top of you. So they're just going to score and score. So I think things have changed, but not in the way maybe some people might think.
Well, there is no lesser teams in Munster, I think it's fair to say, Tommy. I'll ask you the same question as I did about Leinster. What way are you seeing this in terms of 3-2-1?
Yeah, so I think Limerick, Watford, and take your pick out of the other 3 then to come through. So Limerick, Watford, I think, for the Munster final, and the other 3 then take your pick then to come through.
Is there one of the 3 of them sticking out to you?
Sure, who have we? Cork, Clare and Tip. Cork, Clare and Tip. Not really, to be honest. It's a lucky dip, really.
It's the beauty of this competition, though, Tommy. Like, it's like everybody has rightfully been I guess, in just a daze about how amazing that Munster Championship was last year. It was one of the best sporting competitions we've had in this island in a long, long time. And there has been very, very few dissenting voices, but one of them was Brian Carroll speaking at the RTE launch last week, and he was just kind of talking about the preservation of the Munster Championships and preserving it at all costs. He says it's a fantastic competition and we all want that, but he says not all the teams are being treated fairly, not all the teams are equal. You talk about Munster teams being seeded. How long will we persist with this current situation until Munster will want it changed? When they see 2 of the top teams not progressing until the latter stages of the championship, I think they'll rip up the rule book again when teams start to lose out. What do you think of that, Tommy?
Yeah, I'll have to disagree with him on that one, because, like, why fix something that's not broken? The way I look at it, listen, what life isn't fair. Like, I know his point was that if Kerry win, they still have to, I think, enter a playoff to see can they enter the Munster Championship next year. But unfortunately, like, that's just the way it is. And how could you play a Munster Championship without any of them 5 teams, really? It's just like, we're trying to promote hurling and bring on hurling. And Brian might maybe argue the point, then what are we doing for Kerry? But we have the Joe McDonagh Cup, we have the Laurie Marr, we have the leagues where you can progress, and they still can progress to the Munster Championship if they won that playoff. So I think hurling, we're doing everything we can to promote hurling. Like we see in the football, you go out into the football championships and there's so many lopsided games. You don't see that in hurling since the new structures came in. And like you see what enjoyment Carlo took out of winning the Joe McDonagh Cup last year. You take the enjoyment that the likes of Antrim and Kerry got out of winning the Christy Ring Cup over the years. Kildare, like these guys, when they win a title in Croke Park, I think it's all about playing against teams of equal measure. What's the point in going out and playing teams that you're going to get beaten by 10, 15, 20 points? And I think the current structure is brilliant, and the fact that Carlo, they won, right, last year, the Joe McDonagh Cup. They go up into the Leinster Championship. If they start producing competitive performances, well then it'll be brilliant, and they will have got a lot out of it. Say if they start getting hammerings in the Leinster Championship, well next year they're back down the Joe McDonagh So I think it's a win-win. If they're good enough, they get to stay in the championship and enjoy it and promote hurling in their county. If not, they go back and they can do the same thing. You go back to the clubs around the country on. You have senior, you have intermediate, and you have junior and junior A and that. Everybody in their own championship has a chance of winning it. And when you go back training in January, so many teams, so many players are motivated because they can win. And I think that's what's brilliant about hurling at the moment, that you can go back and you have a great chance of winning, whether you're in the Lee McCarthy Cup, the Joe McDonagh Cup, whether you're in the Laurie Marr, the Christy Ring, Nicky Rackard. So, like, you look at Offaly, right? Brains County. You look at Carlow, and just trying to think of the teams of Joe McDonagh. You think of the Laois. These guys, they have a chance of playing in the Lee McCarthy Cup next year if they win the Joe McDonagh. So I think there is a pathway, there is a gate for them to do that, and at the same time to play against teams at the moment of equal measure.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a meritocracy. Just before we wrap up, Tommy, there's one last thing I wanted to get your take on, and it's comments that have not really gone under the radar. They've been spoken about a little bit, but just in case anybody missed them, it was Paul Flynn, Chief Executive of the GPA, speaking about the idea of semi-professionalism, and he was saying last week in an interview that the amateur ethos of the GAA is important, and it's important to our members. However, at the same time, when we ask our members and we consistently survey them on issues, semi-professionalism is something that they would be interested in. And this has been mentioned a couple of more times, and it's starting to be mentioned with a little bit more regularity, Tommy, the idea of semi-professionalism. I'm not sure if this is something you're in favour of or not, because certain GAA figures have come out heavily against this over the course of the last 7 days.
Yeah, and I'd be siding on the crowd that are heavily against it. There's so many negatives outweigh the positives. I can't really see any positives that could come out of it. For example, you look at the Aussie rules. I think Sean O'Halpine spoke about it a few years ago, and he was talking about the likes of Satanta and Izaki. They went over to play Aussie rules after leaving the GAA here in Cork. They get, I don't know how many years of a contract you could possibly get, but maybe a 2-year contract, a 3-year contract, possibly a 1-year contract. Every year, so we're looking at, if we just look at one aspect of it, let's look at the inter-county player himself, right? So what's he to gain out of it? He gets a few bob in his back pocket. If you talk to any GAA player, it's all about enjoyment. It's all about what they love. They love playing for their county. They love the honour of going out in Croke Park and these things, right? But suddenly, right, we bring in semi-professionalism, where they get a few pound every week. Suddenly then, they're in maybe 1-year, 2-year contracts. The enjoyment goes out of it straight away, because suddenly, say if your contract is expiring this year, suddenly you run into maybe a few injury worries. Maybe you're running out a bit of form. Suddenly then you're worried, oh no, will my contract be extended next year? Takes out the enjoyment out of the whole sport. So I think the negatives definitely outweigh the positives. Then you have, like, in Ireland, definitely, we're very much community-based. We're very much, it's us against rival parishes, rival counties. Say, for example, Owen, you're from Tullaroan and you're the manager of Kilkenny. Do you bring in 3 or 4 of your Tullaroan lads, to give them a kind of a weekly wage, to give them employment? Do you drop the lads from the rival parish? There's so much conflict and so much negatives that I think could possibly come out of it. We would destroy everything that we suppose that we love about the GAA. Like, you take up any other, a lot of other sports and other classes, say fitness classes. You go into the gyms and these guys, €5, €7, 2 or 3 times a week. You bring your young lads down to the GAA fields in Tullaroan, or down in maybe Kilmiley or Clare Castle and these places. Free. You bring them in, you pay your membership at the start of the year. You drop them down 2 or 3 days a week. You go down yourself watching matches. The whole community is based around the GAA club. So I think there's just be far more negatives to come out of it than any positives. And that's both for the player himself, with the worry of contracts, and the wider community and the bigger picture.
Yeah, they're all fair points. Like, I guess when it comes to semi-professionalism, Paul Flynn was kind of making the distinction between that and amateurism, that he talks about amateur athletes who represent us at the Olympics and they're in receipt of funding and they train full time. So I think that's what he kind of means by semi-professionalism. But I guess I may be kind of wrongly speaking for you here, Tommy, but do you kind of fear that is a stepping stone towards full professionalism, which obviously kind of comes with the problems that you just outlined?
Yeah, it could possibly happen that it steps up into professionalism. But even look at semi-professionalism, on if say, like, what happens then when they're finished? Do they have education behind? Like, say even look at the amount of teams that would be involved. Like, it's 32 counties, like multiply that by 2, 64, maybe not all of them, but say if you have 60 teams, is it possible to fund 60 teams with panels of 30 players? Then management will probably have to start being looked after. Then you have all sides of things, the county boards will probably have to go full time to be able to look after such big operations. So is it feasible? I don't think so anyway. Like, you look at the whole of the island of Ireland, like how many amateurs regarding the Olympics and the other sports are being paid, and compare that to how many would have to be paid if the GA was to turn semi-professionalism. I just don't think it's feasible. And as I said, it's the worry of what happens. Like, you think of it, you're a young lad, 20, 21 years of age, hurling or football is the only thing in your life, and you don't really think too far into the future at that stage. I think you would probably give up your education. I think you would, if you're getting, say, 400 or 500 euros a week or that, or maybe 30 grand per year, I think you would give up all that because you want to just be the best in Ireland at hurling, or the best in Ireland at football. And you'd say, listen, I'll worry about my education, I'll worry about my career when I finish hurling. And sure, then you could be possibly 26, or you could be 32 or 3, and could be too late. Now, you might want a mortgage, you might want to start a family at that start. So I think just the negatives probably outweigh the positives really on.
Fair point, Tommy. Listen, enjoy the hurling this weekend. I'm sure it's going to be spectacular. We'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, Kenny. See you.